So I think perhaps we'll get started with just each of you talking a little bit, introducing yourselves to each other, because this is the first time you've met us today, correct? Yeah, and your farm and operation, and maybe start with also getting into a little bit of your cover crop businesses. Wade, I hate to put you on the spot, but you have some photos up here first. Do you mind just kicking us off real quick?
Sure, I can go ahead and start. Everybody hear me? Perfect. Sorry. All right, so I'm Wade Dooley. I'm the sixth generation of my family to farm our ground in central Iowa, just north of Marshalltown. We run a somewhat diversified operation. Got a small amount of row crops. I raise small grains for cover crop seed. We did have a decent sized cow-calf beef operation, but we've since downsized that. And I have my own custom cover crop seeding business. That's my rig there. I do custom seeding with a box drill. I cover between 1,500 and 3,000 acres a year for customers on top of my own ground. My company name is Dooley Ag Stewardship, and it was formed 2 years ago thanks to the help of PFI and their entrepreneur program. So I'm pretty happy to be able to do that. We've been doing cover crops on our farm since 1997, so it's something I'm kind of experienced with. I came back to the farm in 2008 and expanded what we were doing for cover crops. We went full no-till shortly before that, and we've been playing around with all kinds of different stuff over the years. And right now I'm raising certified rye, the newest variety out of NDSU, ND Gardner, and it is a really fantastic crop. I really enjoy raising rye, and I really enjoy selling it because it makes me a decent amount of money, and I'm able to get my crop harvested in July instead of panicking about whether or not I can harvest corn and put on cover crops for somebody else at the same time. So it's spread my workload out nicely, so it gave me the opportunity to do a little bit more. That was my grain cleaning setup, which, as you can see, it's really fancy. Really fancy. That grain cleaner is so blasted slow that when I started raising more than 100 acres of rye, I parked that, and I just hire it done now to clean my seed, because that took me a week to clean 100 acres worth of rye, and I hire a guy in now and he does it in 10 hours. So I definitely upgraded in that sense. Go ahead. We do all kinds of custom seeding. In the springtime, I'm usually running alfalfa, hay ground, and small grains for customers, as well as a lot of CRP acres get put in the spring. All of that goes through my drill. In the summer, that's one of my mixes that I use after rye harvest for summer cover crop, and there's about 20 different species in that mix. So it looks pretty cool in the fall. So that's basically my operation in a very small nutshell. Okay. Yep, I'm good.
All right, I guess I'm up. That's Wade's pictures yet.
There we go.
Okay. My wife sent these pictures in. I haven't looked at them that closely, but I also have a calendar that we put out every year for our landlords, people we work with. Lydia's going to pass them around. You can look at them. There's just a little blurb on every month and pictures of the operation. It's been a really good way to communicate with people what we're doing and the conservation practices that they may or may not be familiar with and how they work on our farm. Some of you have already have some calendars. Jane, I think, does, but so just something to look at. Lydia's slide. All right, there's one of the diverse mixes we do. I guess a little bit more about me. I came back to farm in 2001. I went to school on the East Coast, hated it. After 2 years and about 2 weeks, I got in my pickup and drove across the library quad and took off and went back to Iowa. And I did graduate from UNI. They let me in there anyway, and graduated from business school there. And I've farmed ever since, commuted to UNI. We fed cattle at the time, and so I would do chores in the morning and go to college and then come back and feed cattle again. But here's a diverse cover crop mix that we do. And next slide. This would be where I mix seed at. That'd be our bin site. I bought it probably 12 years ago. done a lot of improvements, added some bends, added all the little bends there for cover crops, basically cover crops, oats handling. But the overheads, it used to be a hog feed mill. And I was able to utilize a lot of the existing infrastructure there for my own use. So, and a nice crop of rye growing there too. I believe it's rye. And maybe that's oats. That'd be oats growing on bean stubble. And it has manure injected on it with VTI injector bars. So that's all the tillage we do in a year would be the hog manure VTI bar. And it's the minimum you have to do to make the DNR happy. So, next one. Just another picture of bends that I use for mixing cover crop seed and dryer, I guess. Next one. There's a mixer I bought, not a mixer, cleaner 2 years ago. That was through PFI. Did get the same business accelerator thing that Wade did. It'll do about 2,000 bushel an hour. It's rated at. It'll only actually do about 1,200, and you run it through twice. Being honest, that's kind of how they go. It's actually a Ukrainian mixer. I've got some interesting stories that Lydia told me I can't tell about purchasing it, but talk to me afterwards. So next one. All right, the cleaner again there. I placed it under some overhead bends that were for hog feed, and then I can drop directly into it, run them through the cleaner, drop them into my leg pit, and then discards to go another direction. And then the blue thing is a fertilizer mixer I picked up in Brookings, South Dakota. Another story for afterwards. But mixes about 10,000 pounds at a time, and that's where I do all my custom mixing and then send it out to some of the bends you saw earlier. We do farm too. We farm about 4,000 acres, my dad, my uncle, and me. And we put in a certified scale. I've got about 1,500 acres of crop share. So we had a scale for the crop share, and it actually comes in pretty dang handy for the cover crop business as well. My dad actually went to Iowa State. One of the guys who works for us went to Iowa, and we have a standing bet. I don't know if you see the top of the bin, but whoever wins the football game that year gets to put their flag on top of the bin. And that was not the best year, I guess. But you can see bends, they've got some rust on them. I tend to buy used equipment, put it together, make it work for me. Those came from a different facility that was closed down. I really don't know what my sister's doing there, but here or there. Next one. Just another picture of the scale. You can go to the next one. She sent a bunch of them with the scale in here for some reason. All right, they'd be applying some seed with an airplane. We do aerial seeding. I've had mixed results with aerial, and then I also do seeding with we've got a John Deere air seeder. Hopefully she sent a picture of it, we'll find out. But I also do custom application with the air seeder. Last year I ran the air seeder over about 7,500 acres. Keeps me busy, but we run it in the spring, planting oats. We've been growing about 750 acres of oats, plus or minus. And then I plant that with cover crop too, so I run over those acres twice. We run over all of our corn acres going to soybeans with the air seeder. I use an airplane on bean acres going to corn, just so we get the cover crop started a little bit earlier, and it makes the NRCS a little happier if I'm kind of meeting their deadlines. But next one. Just another picture of the airport. One of my neighbors has a plane, so we just use his. So they don't let me fly it. I've tried. My argument is there's no cops in the sky, but you know, that's never really flown. So get it flown. Yeah, Lydia gets it. All right. They'd be planting. That'd be corn stubble from the year before and planting soybeans into cereal rye. So it'd be my air seeder. It's just a 40-foot John Deere 1890. Got it by Chicago, Illinois. I drove a tractor out there and picked it up. Another story for after. So this would be after oats. A cover crop of turnips, radish, some volunteer oats are out there. Yeah, there'd be turnips, radish, volunteer oats in this one. as you can see, if you plant the small grains, you can get an awesome cover crop after. That's one of the huge benefits of planting a small grain like oats. And I've grown my best corn ever after oats, basically, and cover crop like this, no-tilled into it in the spring. There'd be a picture of field this when I was planting it, or when my wife came out, and it would be within a day or two of planting it. I actually planted into that rye. I killed it about a week afterwards. My nitrogen is all manure based. I don't do any commercial fertilizer. We have hog manure and chicken litter. And you can see the worms in a shovel full of dirt. I mean, it just looks like nice soil. So, another picture of a worm. Maybe we want to go fishing. All right. And then we have a Green Acre Seed Company, we call it. We've applied for some grants over the years. We applied for a Climate Smart Commodities grant that we didn't end up getting, which is annoying. They gave it to Cargill and Bruce Rastatter and Summit and that kind of stuff, but that's here or there. Different conversation. But I have experimented with growing my own cover seed. Generally, I can I've tried growing canola, I've tried growing flax, I've tried growing rye, in all honesty, and my yields haven't been good enough to offset what I can grow with corn, soybean, or oats. And so I grow some oats for cover crop seed. The oats go for food grade. Most of my oats do, and I clean the oats in that cleaner you saw, take the lightest 5% and then use those for my cover crop seed, because they're still good germ, but then that gets my test weight up for milling grade, and I get a premium for the oats when I sell them. So works pretty good, and they kind of work in tandem with each other. But we've been buying seed in bulk from whatever our best supplier of the year is. You know, sometimes Iowa Cover Crop, sometimes Elberly Seed. And since I'm buying several semi-loads, they give me a pretty good discount. And then we essentially repackage it, kind of repack. I'll do a custom mix and then deliver it to the airport or seed it. And I can pass on the savings to the next farmer. And I'm just trying to get people to plant cover crops more than really make a lot of money off of it. But I mean, I mark it up 20%. But so we make a little bit, but not a lot. So that'd be our seed company mainly. So yeah. All right. So that was as presentation as we were supposed to get, I believe. Right, Lydia?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could start, there's a couple places I think you guys could start. We could go into the whole seed part of having a cover crop business, because Wade, you do grow your own rye, and so I'd be curious if you wanted to talk a little bit about how you do make that profitable, or we could talk about how your business is started, or if you guys just have anything you want to talk about, you don't have to do my questions.
I can start, I guess. I mean, our cover crop business started just because we were planting cover crops on our acres. And we're in our area, north central Iowa, cover crops are a little bit of a harder sell. I mean, they're a hard sell everywhere, but we're black, glacial, heavy, flat soil. And since we're planting it, I've been doing it for about 10 years now. I'm getting more experience with it all the time. We've been doing it on 100% of our acres, 100% no-till for 6-7 years now. And I have some experience at it. I sure don't know everything, but I know more than the average guy about it. So if I can help somebody else in our area plant cover crops and get them started, it's kind of what we're going for.
So I got a question. What's your favorite cover crop mix to handle and seed?
My favorite, just because it seems to just always grow, is cereal rye. Everybody says that's your beginning starter cover crop, but there's a reason it is, because we've had just great luck getting it established. Stand is pretty good. We went to seeding with that air seeder instead of the airplane. And then when I'm doing that, I've eliminated my pre-emerge chemical on soybeans because I don't have any gaps. I mean, it's auto steer. I run it, or one of the guys runs it, and we're pretty careful about how we seed. So we don't have any gaps in the field, where with an airplane, Sometimes the end rows wouldn't have anything. Sometimes it'd be strips. We're in windmill country, so then they fly around windmills, and it just didn't work well for eliminating the residual when 20% of the field's not covered. And what have you seen?
I mean, yeah, I love rye because I grow it.
Yep.
But I would say the one I like
You have
better
any for
is,
sale?
do I have any for sale? A little bit. I actually sold out of all my rye I grew this last year and had to bring in another semi-load from elsewhere. So that's how popular it is now, which is great. But my favorite cover crop would probably be oats
All right.
because it's used to be cheap, not anymore. So if you got any extra oats laying
That's
around,
oats. Yeah. We're gonna make a trade
Yeah, there you go.
afterwards.
but yeah, oats are great because they are easy to grow, and in the fall you don't have to do anything once they're out there, and there's no termination to worry about. And so for beginning folks, I really like pushing oats on them instead of the rye because so many people think that rye is a no-brainer in the spring, and that is not the time to stop thinking about it.
Nope.
So
We're experimenting with we've been doing oats ahead of corn on everything, just because of the reasons you mentioned. And I've had small seeded with it. CSP contracts, if you're familiar with the NRCS, one of them requires a multi-species mix. So we'll do an oat with a couple pounds of radish, a couple pounds of turnips. Honestly, I don't think the small seeded ones do a whole lot in the fall. When north central Iowa, they're only going to grow a couple inches. But if they're going to give you, that's what it takes to qualify for the CSP contract, and they're paying for the seed, sometimes you got to jump through a hoop. I think the oats have been really good. Some years we'll have a field that looks like a carpet of green when we combine. This year, you can't even tell I did anything with an airplane. We were dry. We didn't get any rain, so none of my cover crops look worth a darn this fall.
they may look great in April.
Hopefully they do. Might have a lot of oats in April.
That's what I'm thinking.
So we did do some spring wheat, or some winter wheat, sorry, with an airplane this year on some corn acres, and I guess we'll see what the spring brings. So, but yeah,
So that seed cleaner you've got,
yep,
you said you have to run it through twice now, huh?
or 3 times sometimes.
Or 3
depending
times.
on,
Oh, man.
Depends on how fussy.
I was all
I really-
excited. I was all excited about
Depends
that.
on
thing.
how
I really wanted
the-
one.
Seed cleaner, I don't know if Lydia can go back to that slide. Is that, we got to make her work. We didn't want to stand by her, but we wanted her to do things for us. Okay, so the seed cleaner, the way it works, there's essentially a fan right in that area, and the seed will dribble in that yellow chute, and it blows across the airstream, and it separates it by weight, and it'll go down these chutes depending on how much it weighs. And it does an awesome job separating by weight if there's lots of differences between what you're trying to separate out and what you're not. But if, say, you're trying to separate corn and beans from each other, it's awful hard to do because their test weight is so similar. But, I mean, the different shaped seed affects how it flows through. But I've found with an airplane, I can get by, with the oats I grow, I might grow 100,000 bushel of oats, and I'll only clean 20,000 bushel to try to get 2,000 bushel of seed. And so I'll run the oats through it, clean it, and then I've got, say, 5,000 bushel left that I'll run it back into one of my wet hopper bins there that you see in that same picture, actually. And then I can run it from those two back through the cleaner pretty easily. I have it all set up so I can just run it through. And when I do that, then I'll get another, say, 2,500 bushel. I just keep reducing my sample size down until I get either the right amount of pounds, or I run out of oats, or I get enough clean. Then I'll have to run more through if I need more oats to get what I need for seed. Our oats this year up at Grain Millers were 41.2, I think, was our average. So pretty good oats this year, but it was a good year for oats too. So.
So now are you selling those oats, the stuff you clean for seed, are you selling those as seed also, or are you just putting those on your own acres?
I'm just putting it on my own acres because there's patent restrictions and that kind of stuff that I don't really want to get into. I'll buy seed and then sell that seed because that's legal.
Yes.
Who knows how it works? But you can redo that, but you can't because it's certified seed. But where mine isn't certified, I could go through the certification process. I just haven't done it. But on my own use, I think I'm fine. Don't go telling anybody about that. Okay. Yeah. Metra is the brand. Okay. Yeah, he wondered what the make of the cleaner was. It's called Metra, M-E-T-R-A, by Almaz. They've got some YouTube videos. There's a Ukrainian lady who's very nice that sells them. Anna Smirnov is her name, but I think I'm also technically listed as a dealer, but I don't sell them actively. I think I sold 3, but they gave me a 10% discount if I'd say I was a dealer. And so if you're interested in one, I can get you pricing. And they give me 20% of the list. I give whoever's buying it 10% off the top, and I make a couple grand, and then the farmer gets a couple grand back. So no screens. Nope. Yep. There's no screens at all in it. Yep. It does 90% of what a clipper will do. It'll get it to 90% of what a clipper will get it. It won't get it that last 10%. But I'm running my own oats through it. I know how many weeds I have in the field. I make sure I don't have weedy product going into it, as I'm in control of that. And it'll get all the chaff and all of that stuff out. But it does real good on weeds, but it's not, it isn't doing what a clipper does, but it does 90% of it. But it's a whole lot faster, and it's a lot cheaper too. I think that one, when I bought it, was $32,000, and it'll do 2,000 bushel an hour. Where buying a comparable new clipper is ridiculous. I think you were looking at pricing them, if I remember right.
Yeah, I was pricing them.
Yeah.
I stopped looking at pricing.
Yeah.
So this is, I guess, mostly directed at Wade. We are looking at harvesting some rye for the first time in 2023, and I guess I wonder what guidance you would provide. What kind of yield are you getting for the gardener, and just in terms of things to think about in terms of setting the combine, and then maybe what needs to be done immediately with the seed so it has good viability?
Sure. So with rye, or really any small grain, you want to make sure you've got a combine that can run it through and not damage it. So if the combine's worn out, fix it first, or you'll be fixing in the field, and that's a whole lot less fun. Combine settings, go by the book and then adjust, because the book's pretty close on small grains, but it's never quite right. Every year's different for how easy it's going to shell out, or how the size of the kernels. It depends very much on the rainfall. And so yields can fluctuate quite a bit based on the size of the kernels. Gardner rye is not a top yielder. It was bred specifically for the roller crimper folks, so it's bred to be super, super early, and part of that means it's not that high yielding. My yields are averaging in the 50s in good years, whereas something like Danko, which is a very large seeded, heavy yielding rye, and it's a very late rye. Danko, a neighbor of mine raises that, and he's getting 75, 80 bushel yields regularly. So there's a huge difference between varieties. So depending on what you've got and what your target is, you can really see some differences. Harvesting considerations, if you're taking it standing or if you're swathing it, I used to swath and take it standing, and I sold all my swathers, and I just take it standing now. We bolt the head we've got, we can put plates on it and make it rigid. So then I run it as high as I can and just take the heads. And then I can come back later with a mower conditioner and take the straw in manageable windrows or not, depending on what I'm doing in that field. But since I'm only taking the heads, I can fly through that field. And so it makes it a whole lot easier for setting the combine, because I'm not running that whole plant material through that machine. Because I mean, we run a 25-foot head, which isn't that big, but 25 feet of 6-foot tall rye all going in the throat. You're running a ton of material through that doesn't have to be. So,
Landon.
I guess I can add a little bit to that too. We've grown the rye and oats, and we're also tried swathing, and we went to straight cutting. Same thing. keeping the head up, just taking the heads in so we don't have as much material. And we're running a little bit bigger head, but really the same principle. And the other thing on that, if you want to try to harvest it for seed, make sure you get a variety like he's talking, like the Danka or the don't plant variety not stated, and try to do it for seed.
That's a disaster.
I've been there. It doesn't work. I've tried it. Don't do it.
Yep. And then harvesting, once you get that crop in, make sure you get it on air as soon as possible.
Yep.
If you leave it in any container for longer than a day or two, it starts going through a sweat and it'll heat up. I had some in a wagon, a metal gravity wagon. I was too lazy to get done that week, and so I parked it in the shed and I got to it later. That yield, or the germination on that rye, went from in the mid 90s down to 42%. So it was really a bad move on my part. So don't do that.
Yeah,
Make sure you get air on it right away.
We put some in a meridian bin that has, they call it a hopper rocket. It's got a fan inside of it, and it's made for aerating the meridian bin. It's only a 3,000 bushel bin or whatever, and we thought, heck, that'd be fine. And it was good germ going in. We took it out, and it was like 40% germ, and it was stuck to the sides of the hopper about 6-8 inches thick, and I had to go in with a shovel and rake it all out, and then I blended some of that off with some Albert Lee rye on my own usage, and it's gone now, but be very careful with managing the rye in, if you think oats wet, rye is a whole nother ballgame.
Yeah, it can be really problematic. If you don't have a bin with an air floor in it that you can use, I've seen guys take barge box wagons and then lay in bin floor grating on top and leave a gap, and then they put a bin fan in there and are able to force air through a smaller quantity at a time. So that's another way. Or you could do the old-fashioned method with the screw-in fan and have two wagons, and you move from this one to that one and back and forth every day or two. You move them back and forth and keep the fan on. Margaret? Oh, over here.
So, you've mentioned like efficiency things a couple times, both of you. In your whole cover cropping system, if you think about it from start to finish, whether it's growing seed or seeding it in the field, what are like 2 or 3 things for each of you? What are like 2 or 3 things that you noticed as big gains or justifiable expenses in terms of efficiency of that cover crop system?
Number one for me would be getting a high quality seeding equipment. If you're going to do it yourself, he's got a Landall drill, I believe. Mm-hmm. I've got a John Deere air seeder. They're both reasonably new. I think yours is probably, mine's 2013. I think yours is newer than that.
Yeah, it's a year, 2 years.
But if you have poor quality, I had an old Great Plains before this, and I just wasn't getting a good stand. I'd fight the dang thing all the time. Any little piece of chaff would plug it up. High quality seeding equipment would be number one. Number two, if you're going to combine it straight with your traditional corn bean combine, Draper head's pretty nice. I mean, real nice. For efficiency, like I cut 50 foot wide at 4.5 miles an hour and 150 bushel oats, and you just cruise.
I'm so jealous.
So, and it just goes. So, a Draper head's pretty dang nice. It also, on the flip side, it does really help your efficiency of your entire operation, growing something like rye or oats, because if you think about it, normally your combine is sitting in the shed, and it's not making you any money when it's sitting in the shed. But if you're running it in July, that combine's making you money, you're covering acres with it, that for us, it makes it easier to farm more acres with the same amount of equipment. I have 2 tractors and a combine is essentially my equipment. And that combine, if I knock out 750 acres in July, harvest is that much easier for me then. So it's a big savings on your machinery variable cost, essentially. Your fixed cost is already there. So, but your variable cost is really all that oats combining is costing you compared to having the fixed cost with it.
Yeah, for me, 2 main efficiency things. One is auto steer. I love it. It's
Yeah,
great.
I didn't even think, I didn't even think about that. 'cause
Auto
it's-
steer is one of the best and worst inventions.
Yeah.
It really speeds up all your major farming operations simply because you're able to do repeatable passes that don't have any wiggles, unless, of course, the GPS fails, in which case you're back to the Mark 1 eyeball, which is okay. But auto steer really takes a lot of the stress load out, especially because you can run late at night or way early in the morning, and you don't have those weaves. The other thing would be bulk handling equipment. So rather than doing everything in 50-pound bags, having a seed tender that I can just pull in and dump 100 bushel of rye in my drill and go is lovely, because I do bags for customers and I complain the whole time because to dump 100 bushels worth of rye by the bag is a lot of extra time I'm wasting that I could be in the field. So bulk handling is huge.
I think the first year we did covers, I just had a not a true bulk, I had a box tender and took it to the airport. I was doing about 1,500 acres of covers that year, and airplane is there and they want seed. They always want seed. They don't want that airplane to sit. And I borrowed a neighbor's tender, and that was a box tender too, and we were trying to fill boxes and running back and forth, and it's just hectic and just a mess. And now I'm set up where I just can dump it into a hopper trailer, regular semi-trailer, drive that to the airport, park it, and they're good for half a day. And fill up another one at home and take it in, and I don't have to have multiple seed tenders and multiple trips with the pickup to the dang airport and just running with your head cut off, you know, making, one year I think I made like 35 trips to the airport with the dang seed tender, and yeah, it just doesn't really work very well. The bulk is a whole lot easier way to go, but you gotta make sure you get everything cleaned out, because I'm using my 2 wet bins there for cover crop seed as well. They feed my mixer, they feed my cleaner, and some overhead bins too. But I have to go inside and clean out corn after I get the corn empty, and then I can utilize them for the next crop. But that way I can turn my bins too. I get a whole lot better payoff on the efficiency side of my bins. The 100,000 bushel bin in the back, this year I've had oats in it. I filled it with oats, and then I filled it with soybeans. And then November 1st, hauled the soybeans out to Cargill, and 10th of November, I filled it with corn. And so that bin's actually been filled 3 times. So you see people talking about using or building new bins and how bins make money, which I think is debatable. I think it's more of a harvest efficiency thing. But it's a lot cheaper to keep using an existing bin that you have and fill it 3 times than it is to build a new bin and fill it once a year. So.
Any issues with lodging and harvesting and lodging?
Oh yeah.
So how does
Every
that
year.
work? How does that work?
So lodging at harvest is a pretty depressing thing, because usually right before harvest the field looks beautiful, and then we get like a downdraft rainstorm within a week of when I think I'm going to harvest usually, and then I discover my high fertility areas of my fields. Because everywhere there's a little more fertility than there needs to be is where I have rye that's 6 feet tall, now it's 6 feet sideways. And so I ended up putting on pickup fingers on my grain head. And there's a bunch of different companies out there that make all kinds of different styles. The ones I got clip on and clip off. So I can slap them on and go do rye and then pull them all back off, and then I'm ready to do soybeans or whatever. So it's fingers like this, and they just snap over the top of the sickle guards, and so then they extend another 1.5 foot out in front, so I can run the head nice and high through most of the field, and then when I need to, when I hit those lodged areas, I can dive down and pick up the top layer of the rye. I learned my lesson. We don't go and get all of it anymore, because underneath that top layer of rye that's nice and dry is the mud layer. And all the rye that's on the bottom is rotten. And you blend that with all of the good rye that you just got, and then you have a mess. So I don't do that.
We've found working with a company like with oats or rye even that knows what they're doing. Albert Lee Seed has been great to work with for us because we're in northern Iowa. Planting a variety, we plant Rains oats, and the Rains oats are a lot shorter oat. First year we planted them, my dad's like, well, those oats look like crap because they're only that tall, but they don't go down. We've
No.
planted Rushmores, we've planted saddles. The rains, I've never had rains go down, but we're also combining them the day they're ready. Like not 3 days after they're ready, the day they're ready, you're combining them. And I even try to spread out my planting. I only plant like 150 acres a day because that's about what I can combine a day pretty comfortably. And then I'm combining them the day they're ready. If I combine them a little later, it doesn't work. Rushmores, we had those go down. They're a lot taller oat. They didn't really produce any more straw. And they yielded 10 bushel less in our scenario. But I mean, one was 160, one was 150, so I'm not really complaining. But the Rushmores did tend to go down. And then we had saddle oats the year before. And that year I had a split 40 that was split, and half of it, we were going to plant corn on the field. So we started hauling hog manure, and we hauled hog manure at 3,800 gallons an acre for corn on about 10 acres of the field. Then I decided, I'm going to plant oats there instead. And with oats, we haul hog manure at 2,000 gallon an acre, so only about 100 units of N. And that's our fertilizer for the oats. And where I had 3,800 gallons an acre, they went down. They yielded well, but they went down. I ended up having a neighbor with a swather try to come over, and that didn't work. And we learned a lot through experience that year. We're running MacDon draper heads, and you can pivot the sickle bar down, and that does help a lot for picking it up. And they're pretty adjustable on how you can have the reel set and the gauge wheels set to make it easier to harvest the down ones. So good equipment makes it easier to pick up the down ones.
So you guys both talked about rye sweating, and we raise rye, and I don't think rye sweats like what we know oats sweat. But I would need to know what moisture are you combining them at?
I'm usually pulling in around 13, 14%.
Yeah, I was about that. I think I was 13.4 is what my tester said the year that I had issues. And I tried growing rye for 3 years, and every year I tried relay cropping it. I had poor luck with the relay cropping. Most of it was my own fault. I planted it with the Great Plains drill in the fall, too late. It was like October 23rd, and I should have been planting it a month earlier. Planted beans into it at the wrong time. I just, about everything I could have done wrong with relay cropping, did wrong. And I think the rye ended up doing about 20, 25, and the beans ended up doing about 20, 25. And then it sweated in the bin. And then I talked to Lee, and I could buy rye for $10 a bushel. And I'm like, well, what am I doing here? So I just make a phone call, and a semi-load shows up. And I haven't tried relay cropping since, in all honesty. So.
Well, I'm intrigued with what's going on physiologically with that moisture movement. I mean, we always put air on our rye, so we haven't had a bad experience, but we've combined probably from between 13 and 17%.
Yeah.
And haven't had a problem, but.
I don't know.
Yeah.
When I did it, and I had supposedly the best ventilation you can put in a Meridian hopper bin. The high power, for 30, I think those were 3,800 bushel bins, and I had a 2.5 horsepower fan on it, and I didn't get enough airflow, and I don't know, but it was in a full floor bin. But I mean, they're a bin based out of Canada that supposedly is made for supposedly you can dry rye in it, and
Apparently not.
Apparently, I didn't have luck with that. I don't know if the humidity in our environment here might have had something to do with it, or
Those bins get pretty dang hot
yeah. So
when the sun's on.
yeah.
I wondered what Wade's starter cleaner, what brand did you have, the red one? I mean, I would just be starting out on a smaller farm, and that might be ideal for some of us.
Sure. So I actually started with a clipper cleaner, the M2B. So that is the smallest of the clipper cleaners, and it runs approximately 25 bushels an hour. And when you have 1,000 bushels to clean, that seems like a long time. So then I upgraded to that red one you saw there. That's a Farmstead Products. They're based in Minnesota. And that one, they say, did 300 bushels an hour. I don't know what they were doing with it unless they were just pouring the grain from the top to the bottom at 300 bushels per hour, because I do 120 usually. If I have a really clean crop going through, I can push it to 150 bushels an hour, but that's the max that it'll actually do. And I can do a single pass with it because it's a 3-screen cleaner with a fan. So I can get certified seed quality in one pass, which is nice, but it's slow. The guy I hire brings in a machine similar to that, but like 10 times bigger on a trailer, and he's cranking through at, what's he at? He's at 500 bushels an hour on average, and that's really nice when you got a full bin worth of grain to run through. So, but yeah, that other one, that Farmstead products, I bought it a couple years ago. I think it was like $7,000. Cleaners are not cheap. So that's the downside. It's a really vital piece of equipment if you're going to be doing a lot of seeding, especially if you're running seed through a drill, but they're all really expensive.
An airplane can take more chaff
Yep.
than a drill.
Yep.
You don't have to have it as clean for airplane seeding as you do for a drill. So just for your knowledge.
Yeah, and if you're broadcasting, you can just about throw a tree out of it.
Yeah.
So,
Say to the person that was talking about harvesting rye, you put it in semi, don't tarp it, leave it open overnight, because I learned that this year. I had rye pick up 2 points of moisture overnight. Combined it at 14, and I dropped it off at the retailer at 16, and we were all surprised. I was just curious because Landon, I know I've talked to you about this before. Wade, you grow your own rye. I'm growing my own rye and selling it to a local Iowa dealer. Have you seen any like epigenetic changes with rye that's grown locally and planted locally versus something that's purchased, say, from like North Dakota or, you know, some other place and then planted and raised for grain?
right. So I've seen on a couple different farms, I know a few guys that save their own seed year after year after year, and rye reverts to or adapts rather quickly. You can raise the same rye 3 years in a row. You just save the seed back and plant it every year for 3 years, and you'll see a completely different plant after that third generation. It's going to behave differently. Your uniformity goes way out of whack because it's all open pollinated. So it's not in sync anymore. And so, yeah, you'll see some variations, but mostly it's just due to the fact that it's an open pollinated variety now. The one guy I know, he was growing Elbon, and his Elbon now looks nothing like his Elbon when he started, but it actually yields twice as well. So whatever he's doing is working.
Save some of that.
Yeah.
Who comes in to do your custom cleaning, and do you know how wide their capabilities are for seed size? Like, could you do something like a small grass seed?
So the guy I use is out of Washington. He drives from southern Iowa clear into Minnesota or Wisconsin during doing seed cleaning, and he does all kinds of different stuff. I don't know what all he's capable to do. It'd be a matter of quantity that gets him to come. Like, I've got 5,000 bushels to run through, and I get to the top of his list because some of his other customers have 500 bushels, and he's driving 100 miles for them. So it's a matter of scale. If you've got 500 bushels of grass seed that needs cleaned, he could probably come and do it, but it will not be probably at 500 bushels an hour. Yep. Yeah, his name's Pat. Yeah. Yeah, he is, and he's really accommodating. So, the cost of cleaning varies depending on how far he's got to drive and how many bushels you're running through. His average rate the last couple of years, I think, has been about $1.25 a bushel, plus or minus. So, yep. Other questions?
What's your suggested seeding rate for weed suppression in soybeans? How low can you go? A lot of them recommend 120 pounds of rye to seed for weed suppression. What's your recommendation? How low can you go?
It depends on when you're putting it on. If you can get the rye in early, you don't have to put as many seeds out there to get the same number of stems and get the same amount of weed suppression. If you're putting rye out in November, you're going to be cranking that 2 bushels easy just to get coverage. But if you're putting it in, say, Labor Day weekend, flying it on, and you've got a pilot that's really good at it, you can get a really thick stand with a bushel, bushel and a half, no problem. But it's got to be on. You've got to get the right reins. You know, there's a lot of timing things that have to play in to make it work.
Yeah, I'm seeing with an airplane, we were always doing 60 to 65 pounds an acre, and I wasn't getting good weed suppression. It was thin, just didn't work, most of it. I mean, probably only 2/3, 3/4 would come up in any given year. With the air seeder putting it on, I'm down to about 50 pounds an acre is what I'm running. And like I said, I cut out my pre-emerge soybean chemicals now. So I'm saving a fair bit of money.
And when are you trying to put it on?
As soon as I combine the corn, like the day I combine the corn, yeah, I want the tractor in the field, and we'll plant, depending on the field, my crop share fields, I'm not as aggressive on just because we're not it's a different situation, but I'll plant 98-day corn a lot of times. And what I do is I try to hit the early markets, the ethanol plants, because a lot of times there'll be a positive basis in our area anyway, because everybody's crying for corn the end of September. So I'll combine, like this year we did 50,000 bushel in September 15th to the 20th, and that was a 75-cent overboard price. I mean, it was a heck of a price. Then I think we did another 50,000 the next week, and then I have 500-600 acres of corn done, and I got the cover crop seeded. And the sooner you can get that cover crop seeded, the better off you are. I mean, September isn't too soon. But
No.
No. The sooner you get it done, the better weed suppression you're going to have, and the lower rate you can go, and the method of application really depend. I wouldn't try to get weed suppression with an airplane. I just haven't had luck with it. But if you're doing it with a drill or an air seeder, then you can get it with, I'm doing 50 pounds. So. I'll go from 50 pounds up to about 65, and then some of it will depend on the field, the mix I'm doing, but yeah, I'll up it a little bit, but not a lot. I suppose I probably should up it more. I got a little burned out of running the drill, I'll say, this year. By the time November came around, and I was still chasing the combine with it, and I'm like, all right, I just want to be done right now. So it's less. But the thing I like about the air seeder is that mine holds 350 bushel, so I can fill it, and I can fill it with a conveyor out of a semi hopper, and I don't have to worry about filling the rest of the day. And so the efficiency of that's pretty nice compared to, say, the box drill, where you're running through, you got to fill a little bit more, and it works better for me. Our farm, our Bend site's pretty centrally located, and I can actually independently seed while the combines are running somewhere else, and I can just come back and fill myself out of a Meridian bin, and then I don't have to have extra help to do it. One person can run that operation. And then I do use the Meridian bins in the spring then for bulk soybean seed. And a company like, say, Syngenta, we get our bulk soybeans from, you can get about, I think it's $3.75 a unit this year was the savings I got for taking my seed in bulk in October. Basically, as soon as it came into Syngenta, they cleaned it, they sent it out right away, they want it out of their facility. You're saving 10% of your soybean seed cost by taking a semi-load early, or a couple semi-loads early. And so I get more use out of the Meridian bins that way, and it really helps pay for them a lot.
So question for both of you. We'll start with Landon. What's been the secret in your area to help grow the cover crop adoption? And the reason I want to start with Landon is because in your part of the state, unfortunately, since I get up there fairly often because I got family members, it appears the latest trend is to now do full primary tillage on soybean stubble in the fall. Now that you're cool if you do that.
Yeah, that's
so both you tell us about that.
I think there's been a little bit of money made the last few years. So there's been a lot of, 9RX big tractors show up in our area the last couple of years, and a whole lot of them. And so now you have that tractor, you have to use that tractor, where I've sold my I don't have a big tillage tractor anymore. I've got a 380 and we got a 340 we mainly use for hauling hog manure, chicken manure, and side dressing. And then 380 pulls the planter in the grain cart, and they'll trade off on the air seeder depending on which one's available. But I'll say I've planted probably 92% of the cover crops in Franklin County for the last 6 years, and I wouldn't say there's a lot of new adaptation. The biggest barrier to adaptation is people trying it and not having the right equipment or not the right experience, and working with people that have experience. So they'll be like, well, I saw it on the internet, or I read it in Farm Magazine, this is how you do a cover crop. And then they go out there and they wing it and they try to plant a cover crop without any real support, and then it's a failure, and they say, well, cover crops don't work. I don't want to plant cover crops. I'm never going to do it again because they don't work. So for anybody trying it, and if I know somebody's going to plant a cover crop, I go talk to them. I'm like, I'll give you any hint I can. I don't even care if I sell you seed. I'm not really active about selling seed anyway. So I got enough going on. And biggest problem is that they don't have experience. They're not working with somebody experienced.
Yeah, that'd be a major barrier in my area as well. Is there's a lot more people in my area that do use cover crops, but they don't use it to the extent that they could or probably ought to be. The tillage thing is, there's a lot of guys regressing right now. They had way too much free time the last 2 falls, and they really decided they needed to burn that cheap diesel, and so they've been doing a lot of that. I think one of the curses of farming is that once guys start making money, they stop using their brains and they just go and do the thing that they like to do most, which is drive tractor. When they start losing money, then they start adopting new practices. So until they're losing money, apparently they're just going to keep being stupid. I don't know. I really hate wasting diesel, and just watching him run is like, that's a lot of fuel you just burned to destroy your soil structure and deep rip mud. Cool.
Yeah.
Call me next spring.
And another thing I see is people will they'll say they're no-tilling. They say they're going to no-till, they no-till their beans. And so they no-till their beans into corn stalks. And then after the beans, then they go out and they chisel it and they field cultivate it. And then they might do 2 years corn and 1 year beans, and then they deep rip it after their corn for their corn on corn, and then go field cultivate it again, and then they no-till their beans, and then they say, this no-till didn't work. But they're not letting no-till work because they destroy the soil structure 2 out of the 3 years. That 1 year of no-tilling some beans into some corn stalks, maybe with some cereal rye, maybe not, just doesn't work. It took us about, actually is faster than I'd think it would have been, but it was about 4 years, and then our soil just kind of changed. It was almost like magic. It just, that year, I mean, I was out, and that year we were still doing some anhydrous. I was putting on anhydrous in the spring, and I was out and nobody else was out, and they're like, how the heck are you even out there? And I'm like, I don't know, it's working good, it's sealing good, everything's good about it. If you're putting on anhydrous, that's, but everybody's evolving. But our soil just changed. And so when they don't give it an opportunity to change is another big barrier, or they think they're no-tilling by no-tilling the beans into corn stalks, but they still rip the end rows, and then they say, oh, the end rows are mud, and I packed the end rows, I better rip them. Just let the soil structure change, and then you won't destroy the end rows, and you don't need to rip them.
And you save a lot of money.
And a lot of work. Yep.
Is your standard rotation after oats to go put in that big cover crop?
My standard rotation after oats, I'm a corn, soybean, oats. Corn, soybean, oats is my preferred rotation. This year, the oat price sucks. Apparently, they grew a bunch of oats in Canada last year, 200 bushel oats everywhere. I'm actually probably cutting my oat acres by a few hundred acres just because corn is so much more profitable on cash flow wise for this coming year. You know, the oat price is down to $4 a bushel from grain millers. You can get 5 from other markets, but
You might,
the oat prices went down 50% and the corn price hasn't.
you might look into raising seed oats
Yeah.
and selling cover crop
Yeah.
seed, because the
Yeah.
oat market for cover crop
Yeah, it's good.
oats is
Yeah.
about double that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I figured 9. So,
So after you had that big cover crop, you said you had your best corn ever.
yep. Yeah. Like-
Do you think it's worth it to do that big cover crop regularly?
Yep.
Or if you do a double crop, are you shorting yourself?
I like to see the cover crop. I really do. I also rent ground and have some land payments and got to make the, I also need to make money and make the banker happy and be here the next year. My current projections on corn, you know, I'm making, say, $200 an acre. Oats, I'm only making 30. So in beans, say 100.
Are you
So-
selling straw off too, or not?
I don't sell any straw off. I've done it before. I don't like removing the organic matter is as much of anything. And straw is a fickle market. Getting paid for straw is a fickle market. There's a lot of issues that come along with selling straw that is just a headache for me, especially if you start valuing the, say, what you're taking off at $50 a ton, and then you're selling it for $100 a ton, and you just not enough margin to make it work with the organic matter. Like by my soil tests, I take my soil test myself, and Oregon, we have to do it for manure plans for our hog sites. Our soil organic matter has went up 1.3% in about 4 to 5 years, which is amazing. On, you know, our soils were already 3.5 to 4, now they're up to 5 on organic matter levels. Same lab, same person taking them, pretty much everything the same across the board. But our fields that have had oats are really the ones that are shining, and the really big cover crop afterwards.
Yeah, I would,
Right.
I would second that completely. If you can afford it,
Yep.
to not get a second crop off of that field after the oat harvest, get a heavy cover crop out there that's going to grow like crazy, and you can change a field in a single season.
Yep. Yeah.
You can completely change the soil structure. You can completely change water infiltration rates. Everything will be different the next year, and it will be mind blowing
I think.
the first time that happens.
Yes, I think my corn last year, I'm in Franklin County, no, I no-till everything, but manure for everything. My overall average on corn was like 228. The field that was following oats went 273.
So we're
And you
running up
start
on,
throwing that into the value of the oat crop, but how do you, it's a bird in hand, a bird, you know, it's future value, and how do you, so that's why I'm still planting half the normal acres of oats or so, rather than not planting any. But
so we're running up on time here, so I'm going to let Nancy ask the last question. And then I know there's other questions still, so I'm sorry if we didn't get to you, but I'm hoping Wade and Landon can just stay put and answer some questions from folks afterwards. But Nancy, here you go.
Very quickly, you talked about the need to put air on rye or any small grain in the summertime as soon as you harvest. What is your aeration practice until you use the seed in September, October? It's really hard to get an EMC of 13% when you've got the humidities that we have in late July, August, and even into early September now, even at night.
So what I do on my operation is I run, we've got a couple grain bins with the right kind of floor in it so that the rye doesn't fall through it, which is important. But I got a couple grain bins with a good drying floor, and I run air, just air, no heat, for about 2 weeks after harvest. And then after that, I don't worry about it. Usually what I do is I combine, get it right on air, run air for 2 weeks, and then I pull it out of the bin, then we clean it and put it back in another bin. And so I'm moving that grain and aerating it again basically by running through the cleaner and everything. And so any potential hot spots are mitigated at that point because it's getting moved. And then I'm moving rye, I'm selling rye from usually the last week of August until I'm out. And it's getting moved weekly at that point because I'm unloading it continuously.
I'll kind of second that. We make sure there's going to be, I mean, we cone any bin that's got grain in it, we cone down pretty much immediately. And then we also have a grain monitoring system in every bin we have. So they all have temperature cables and moisture cables and actually CO2 sensors. So they'll actually tell me if there's a issue starting in the bin, and then I can adjust my aeration based off of that. But we'll do very similar to him, put it in the bin, run the fan for 2 weeks, cone it down during that time. And then after that, you pretty much don't worry about it, but I watch my grain temperature cables pretty closely. So.
Well, I hate to cut us off because this was an amazing round of Q&A, but we are at time, and I want to make sure people get a full break before our next session starts at 3:30. So let's give another round of applause to Wade and Landon.